Okay, we're going to look at a couple of airbrushes, taking them to pieces. And I always take the needle out first, and that gets the needle out of the way, and it also helps stop me from pricking my fingers with it. So we got the needle there, needle chuck which holds it in place with this, and the auxiliary lever and the spring is connected to this piece that I'm unscrewing at the moment. Now the auxiliary lever, sometimes they're connected to this and sometimes they're not. Spring is attached there inside, and the trigger is there. At the bottom we've got the quick release connector and the air inlet valve, and two washers there, one there and one there. Everything looks reasonably clean on this one because I haven't used this airbrush before. Cap unscrews, and there's the washer there as well, almost dropped it. And then the needle cap that protects the needle and helps protect your fingers as well. Nozzle cap comes off, and then we've got the nozzle at the very end itself, and that unscrews like so. Nozzles are extremely small, and just be careful that you don't over tighten them when you put them back on, and also drop them on the floor. Occasionally they've got a washer in here to seal it when you screw it back in. I tend to take those off and I use beeswax. I find the beeswax more reliable, and it also I don't have to keep buying and finding washers to fit the nozzles. Now when I put this back on, what I normally do is slightly tight. If I use beeswax, I just bring it forward just to wipe it off. Put the nozzle cap back on, needle cap back on, and little hole down there for the trigger to go into. And it can be a little bit interesting sometimes to get that in the right place. Screwing the auxiliary lever and the spring unit back in. There we go. And the needle, I use a little bit of lubrication on it, just a little tiny bit. Keeping it away from the tip. Putting back the needle chuck. Making sure everything's working fine. Actually it's a little bit easier now. Put some lubrication on there. And screw that back on. And put that back on. There we go. So we've got a dual action. So when you press down you get air, and when you press back you get paint with the air. Now some mistakes people make is they're painting and they let the trigger go, and that gives you a a little blob, but also dries up the air on the tip a little bit quicker. So the correct method of using an airbrush is to press down, bring it back to where you want it, and then let the paint off, and then let the air off, and that way that'll reduce the build up on the needle. If you get build up on there, next time when you go to use it, you get a little splatter of paint, which you don't particularly want really. This is a cheap Amazon, I think it was, and I think it was around about €8 or something. So very cheap. Oh, not use this one, so it's a bit tight. Here we go. Yeah, normally the cheap ones you have the auxiliary lever separate, and you have to manually put those in before you put in the spring unit, which can be a little bit interesting sometimes, but oh no, this one's integrated, and it looks fairly similar to the one we used before. A little bit more tighter fit to get it back in. Tolerances aren't quite as good as on the cheaper ones as they are on the more expensive airbrushes. The previous one we looked at wasn't that expensive, you know, compared to some really. But the cheaper ones, it's pot luck. I've got 2 or 3 really cheap ones which are excellent, and I use them a lot. Take the needle cap, no nozzles come off. Okay, so what have we got? So slightly different design to this one here. There we go, nozzle cap and needle cap there. And normally on the cheap ones these don't come off. For this particular one unscrews. Still got the cap on it at the top, mainly because I've never used this one. You can see that it's cheap materials that they're using. So the advantage of having the more expensive airbrushes is that you can get parts for them. And a disadvantage of having the cheaper ones, it's nigh on impossible to get parts, replacement parts. This was a little bit sticky to begin with, but with the lubrication on there, it's come out nicely now. And that's it really. Say the more expensive ones are easier to get the parts, but obviously they're more expensive. But the main thing is to look after your airbrushes.